Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name's Carol Powers. I am a master gardener of Lake County. We are associated with the OSU, and I do want to say, well, before I get into the presentation, I have a couple of things that I want to explain. I have here a Meet Us in the Garden series that we do once a month, the first Saturday of the month at the Minter Library. And we have started this in March, and we will do it through November. And this is a list of the topics that we have. If you wish to attend that, you need to go through the Minter Library to register for that program. Also have another card that I'd like everyone to have, and this is a shameless plug for Master Gardeners. The one side tells you a little bit about what we do, and this side has information about how to contact us. We do have a helpline that's available on Tuesday mornings from 9 to 11. That's where you can talk to somebody in person. There are people will be in the office. If you have a question outside of that time, please leave a voice message with your name, your phone number, and just a real brief description of your question. Or you can email us, and there is a group that will monitor for the email questions, and they'll get back to you and ask you about what you're trying to find out about. So let's get going with the discussion of hydrangeas. Of course, the most asked question about hydrangeas is why doesn't mine bloom? And we're going to be talking a lot about that, and hopefully you'll learn some facts and perhaps realize what you might have been doing wrong, and we'll try to correct it in the future. First of all, I want to give credit, extreme credit, to Eric Barrett, who is one of our extension educators. He is actually in Mahoning County, and he is our expert. And I have learned a lot from him, so I just want you to appreciate how much he has helped. What we're going to be talking about is what type of hydrangeas. There are multiple types of hydrangeas. The big question that I hope to help you understand is what is old wood and what is new wood. And we'll be doing some pictures and some explanation. So I want to help you decide what type of hydrangea am I talking about, because they're quite different in various forms. And then give you some hints for pruning. When do you prune and how do you prune? So that's what we hope to learn today. First of all, we have to talk about your preparation of your soil for wherever you have hydrangeas. And the best way to know about the soil is to have a soil test, do a soil test. You can get a soil test kit, purchase a soil test kit from the Extension office in Paynesville. It's $12. It has it has a bag in it that you collect your sample in. You have all the directions of how to collect your sample, what you do with it, and then send it off to Penn State, who's the one, that's the lab that we recommend. And within a couple of weeks, well, a couple of days actually in some cases, you will get back a description of what the soil test is telling you and with recommendations of what you might need to do to improve your soil. Then, of course, now that you know what conditions or what you need to do to get your soil appropriate for the plants that you're doing, you must go out and understand the light conditions where you want to plant that plant, or understand the light conditions that you have throughout your garden and make choices. Okay, oh, I should be putting that kind of plant here. Oh, that one shouldn't be here. I should move that somewhere else. And then, of course, you go through the process of preparing the soil. So basically, the reason you do a soil test you have no idea standing out in your yard whether your soil is acidic or basic, and different kinds of plants like different kinds of soil. So the soil test will tell you, it'll give you a bit of a picture of what your soil conditions are. It also will suggest perhaps anything that you need to add to your soil to make it more appropriate for what you're trying to plant. And it tells you what you have, but also what you might be missing. Okay, sometimes it's a little difficult if you're new to this. If you have trouble with the soil test when you get the answers or get the report, please call us at this number, and we'll be glad to help you have your soil test before you so you can answer questions that we might have. Now, it's very important. One of the key things about successes in gardening is making sure you have the right plant in the right place. Not necessarily this plant where I want it, but you have to make judgments. And of course, to do that, you read the label on the plant if it's a new plant, or you do some research if you know what the plant is. Find out what kind of characteristics. Does it like sun? Does it like a lot of moisture? Can it, how big does it get? Is my space adequate for what I'm trying to plant? You need to know what the conditions of your planting site. Right now, I'm redoing a bed at home, and I'm completely changing things around because, I've been in this home for a number of years, and so the conditions of light and everything has changed. I show you this picture of a tag that comes with a particular variety of hydrangea, and there's all kinds of information. Now, your tag might not be this complete, but the minimum on your tag should be telling you what you're looking at, whether it's this kind of plant, with what we call a cultivar, is kind of particular to a given species of a plant. So anyway, it tells you how to plant, what kind of conditions and everything. But the key that we're trying to tell you is make sure this plant likes to be where you are trying to plant it. And, sometimes I'm as guilty as anybody else. I'll see a new plant and I think, oh, I've got to have that plant. Then I realize, oh, I have mostly shade. And so that new cultivar just won't work in my yard. And unfortunately, I have made the mistake of trying to make it work, and it doesn't. Plant knows what they want. For a hydrangea, this is a very general statement because each type may take a little bit different condition. It likes moist, well drained. That means it doesn't like dry. Obviously after it's not going to like a place where water collects and stays for a couple of days if we've had a downpour or something like that. So that's, sometimes you think that's kind of an oxymoron, but moist but well drained. Okay. They generally like part sun, part shade, and ideally, if you have, where depending upon the orientation of your house, it likes morning sun but afternoon shade. So that's kind of gives you a big picture. Now we'll be talking about the different types, and some of them like a little bit different things like that, but that's generally speaking, in other words, most hydrangeas, some will do quite well in hot sun in the afternoon, but not all. So again, making sure you understand what your plant wants versus where you wish to plant it. Okay, these are just some of the types of hydrangeas we'll be going through. There's what's called the smooth leaf. They're usually the first ones to bloom. Then we have what's the big leaf, and I've got some pictures of the leaves once we go through this. Oak leaf, the leaves on that one actually look like oak leaves. We'll see the picture in a minute. Then there's a climbing hydrangea, That's not nearly as common. And then we have what is called a panicle hydrangea, and that's related to the shape of the bloom. Some plants only bloom on old wood, and we'll talk more about what that means in a little bit. Old wood is something that is growing on a stem that was there last year, okay? New wood is something that, a stem that grew this year, okay? And that will become important, particularly when we talk about the big leaf hydrangeas, the most common one. Also, there's the shape of these are some terms that we will be talking about. A mop head is something that has a round bloom. Okay, there are two or three different types have the round bloom. The panicle, on the other hand, is one that's pointed. You're going to see that more in the type of hydrangea that blooms a little later in the season. And there's a couple of points you can see. One that's quite pointy. This one is just cone shaped, So from these pictures, and then I didn't mention the lace cap, that is similar to a mop head, except it doesn't have all those petals and those things that, if I can move over there, I point, the pink are they're ornamental flowers. They don't have a reproductive, they're not a true flower in the, not having reproductive portions. The little things that are sticking up there, that's a true flower. So the plant itself, the flower itself, is a combination of just a few of the colorful petals, whereas it has some of the true flowers in the middle. So the first type we're going to be talking about, first type we're going to be talking about is the arborescens. These are the first ones that bloom in the spring. Usually not much sooner, maybe a week or so earlier than some of the ones later. They have the big balls. They're the ones that you see early in the spring. Sometimes their heads are very big. Some of them are even a foot tall. They are white or a light pink. You will never see a blue smoothleaf hydrangea. That's one of the things that breeders and hybridizers dream of. Early bloom tend to be 3 to 5 feet tall. So, this is an example of the one that's bloomed out. It blooms out white or kind of greenish a little and then turns white. Okay? Let's move it now. The macrophylla are the big leaf. Now this is something that a lot of the hydrangeas are the macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangeas. They have more texture to the leaves. They're bigger. They tend to bloom June through August. And these are the ones that have the color, the blues, the pinks, the roses kind of colors. So that's the reasons they're so popular. There's just so many different varieties that you can get. Now they have, originally, the mop heads, or the macrophyllias, only bloomed on old wood. However, now they have developed, Michael Durer, this is his book, has developed, back in the, about 20 years ago or so, you probably started hearing about endless summer. And that was one that continued to bloom after that first initial bloom. It's a rebloomer, and it reblooms on new wood. And that's what has led to the popularity of this macrophyllias, because they're long blooming. They start in June and will continue to bloom through August, and then the different things will age. The bloom color depends on the pH of your soil. So if you have, they like a slightly acidic soil. pH is a number that for horticulture discussions is a number between 4 and 5 and 7 and 8. So, and 7 is neutral. Your soil is neutral at 7. 7 and above is appropriate for lawns. In fact, as a lawn will not do very well if it's below 7. On the other hand, for most of our perennials and shrubs and things like that, they tend to do well slightly below 7. So your soil test will tell you the condition of your soil. So, but if you're doing hydrangeas and the macrophilias in particular, if your soil is slightly basic, there's acid and base. If it's basic, it tends to be pink, on the pink side. If the soil is between 6.5 and 7, it tends to be blue. So you can actually adjust the pH of your soil by soil amendments. And, most people are trying to get the nice blues. So often you will have to add a little bit of a chemical to bring it down. Again, there's all kinds of information about how you do that, and you can always call and we'll help you. Okay, so the big leaf hydrangeas usually are somewhat between 3 and 6 feet tall, depending upon how much you prune. These are the oak leaf hydrangeas. They're the cone shape. This hydrangea is at the corner of my house, and it loves it there. And I just let it grow, although it's getting quite big now. I just think it's so interesting because of what the changes it goes throughout the seasons. It blooms white, which is, again, June, sometime in the June time frame. Then as the summer goes on, it turns kind of rosy. And then when fall comes, after, September or something, the leaves turn a nice reddish color. And if you want to try to keep in the fall, often the blooms turn kind of a rusty color. To prolong the amount of the pinkish color, you have to keep them well watered. Okay, otherwise the blooms will dry out a bit. Now this thing can mine is probably 9 feet. I just hate to cut it back because and we'll talk about how you do that, because it's so pretty throughout the year. So I've just kind of let it go. And this summer, I'm just going to have to do some pruning, but that will sacrifice the blooms later on. Okay? This is a very small group that they're very related to the macrophilia, sort of a subgroup of the macrophilia. They're also called mountain hydrangeas. They do have the lace cap blooms, see there, the few petals, but now these things can be stunning when they are first blooming because it'll just cover the bush with the blooms. They're pink or blue, again, depending upon how you manage the pH. They have smaller leaves. They do bloom on old wood, so they maybe bloom a little bit later than some of the others. They do tend to be a bit more cold hardy, and we'll talk more about that too, because one of the problems with when you don't have blooms, it depends somewhat, if it's a macrophilia, it depends on our winter, and that might have been your problem, but we'll talk about how to get around that. They tend to be smaller, 2 to 3 feet, and there's not nearly as many different cultivars as there are in the macrophilias. The paniculatas are the ones that you see all over after July, mid-July. And again, you can have some that have, not as full of blooms, some that are very, have big blooms. Pollinators love these things. The nature of the plant, they get, it satisfies them. They can get the pollen that they're looking for. They do get quite tall. They can get up over 15 feet if you don't prune them. But we'll talk about how to do that in a bit. Then there is the tree hydrangeas. They are kind of a unique group. The blooms are all lace cap. They're a heavy vine. I mean, if you have one of these, that's an old tree. That's a tree that actually the tree has died. It's been cut off at the top, but it makes a wonderful trellis for the climbing hydrangea. It blooms on old wood, and it blooms beginning in June. It's one of the earlier ones starts. It's very slow to establish. And once it has to be about 5 years old before it really gets going. But once it gets going, and it can grow up, quite high. It obviously will have to be on a trellis of some sort, but a heavy trellis or a tree trunk. That's the reason you often see them on trees. And it doesn't really harm the tree. So how can you determine what type of hydrangea you have? I've told you about some of the characteristics of each type. So if we're looking at the macrophilias and the paniculatas, which are the most common ones that you see, there's totally different structures of the root system, or the stem system, I should say. This is not a very good picture. I was out yesterday trying to get a better picture to show. The macrophilias are going to have lots of stems coming up. So, you can really tell the difference between the two, macrophilia and a paniculata. A paniculata tends to, those are actually one on the left side is the macrophilia. It's hard to see that there's multiple stems there. On the other hand, on the other side, you see that it's kind of coming up from a single stem. You see a lot of paniculata hydrangeas are actually trees. They're very easy to, when a lot of times they will there'll be a stem about this high, and then you have a plant that's, So the aberrances of the smooth leaf hydrangea has multiple stems, but they're very different from the way the macrophilias are. And they have different characteristics. Now this is a picture of the leaves, the shape, when I was talking about the different leaves. This was a picture that I did last summer, and it was the same day, so you can get it, I have mountain hydrangea on the one side. The leaf is a little bit smaller than the big leaf hydrangea. You can see that, comparing that. Of course, the oak leaf hydrangea is very easy to pick out. The smooth, see how compare the texture, between the big leaf and the smooth hydrangea. It's just, it is smoother. It still has a texture, but it's smoother. And it gives you, that's one way that you could help confirm the kind of hydrangea you have. Okay, so you've got the structure of the roots or the stem system to look at. You've got the leaf characteristics, and if you remember or you've seen it bloom, then you can tell some of it by the shape of the bloom itself. So, okay, now that we've got all this information, how do you prune your hydrangea? First, we're going to talk about the smooth hydrangea, the one that blooms first. You can prune this either in the fall or in the spring. And this one's easy because you can cut your canes down. Cane is the stick, if you will. You can cut them down to 3 to 6 inches. So it blooms on new wood. So those new buds. Now I don't prune mine until the spring because then you've got this new growth coming up. What I do is when, in April or March, or depending upon the season, or how warm or cold the spring is, you just pinch, maybe your stems might be 6 inches or more. You can just pinch them very easily back to about 3 inches, 3 to 4 or 5 inches. Okay, now that helps the plant to be a little more full, but you also don't want to, it also helps if you thin the shoots, like, instead of having all those shoots, I would have maybe half that many. And then you're usually going to get a slightly bigger bloom and not as crowded, because then the air can get around and, the leaves are exposed to sunlight and all of that. I also, one of the problems of this, they're always so pretty when they first come out. Then if we have a big rainstorm, they kind of flop down. They do have, and now they have some varieties that they call incredible balls because they're so big. So you really want to kind of when you thin out the shoots, then it tends to have more energy for the stem, so maybe it will support the bloom better. You might want to put a cage around it to kind of help hold the stems up, particularly after it had, but put the cage around it before all of the growth. Okay, some people use tomato cages or something like that. I tend to use some fencing around. Okay, now we're getting back into the next one, type, the macrophylla blooms. Now I talked about how it blooms on old wood. Now looking at this image on the right, this gives you a better picture of how there's a lot of growth along those old stems. That's the old wood. Actually, this type of hydrangeas pushes buds in the fall. So if you go out and cut your hydrangea down to the ground, you've cut off all the blooms that are going to come on old wood. Now, fortunately, with the hybridization that they've done, now most of the hydrangeas and macrophylla hydrangeas you'd buy are bloom on old wood and new wood. So when you get, I was trying yesterday to get a picture of a new growth that's coming directly from the ground and not from one of the stems. Unfortunately, they haven't quite done that yet with this year, but you will see, you'll have nice green stems if it's new growth, but first of all, you want to remove the dead stems. And that you have to kind of experiment with that a little bit to understand. If you cut a stem and it's green on the inside, it's not dead, it's still living. You prune the stems with buds. You count from the ground up if you have a stem, and I do this in the spring because they're beginning to push those buds. And you count from the ground up 1, 2, 3 buds. Then you can prune above that. Okay, so there's some of these I left because there wasn't as many stems on this particular variety, but that a lot of it you can see the shorter ones in there. That's 1, 2, 3 buds from the ground up. Okay, clip that off. That helps control the size of the plant. You're going to get that first flush of blooms, which come in June, whereas the flush of blooms that come on the old wood, that they're going to continue to bloom through July and August. That's what makes these plants so cool. You also want to perhaps, depending upon the density of the canes that you see in the spring, you may want to take some of those out because that opens up the plant. Air can get in and all the leaves can get enough sunlight and everything. So, and I always remove the little thin canes because, you know, they're going to have a big bloom on the top, you know, and then they flop over. So, okay. So kind of, this is the hard one. Of course, it's the most popular one too. But understanding old wood, new wood. Now, part of the problem depends, if you're having problems with it blooming, depends on the kind of winter we've had. Because again, it's pushed those little buds there. You can hardly tell that they're there, you know, but there's a little knob, you know, kind of a little bud. And if we have a really, really cold winter, it will kill those buds. So the years that we have, you know, now that doesn't seem to be a problem anymore, but it was not this last winter, but the winter before, when we had that very cold, windy weather at Christmas time. The hydrangeas did not bloom well last year. Now, a number of years ago, back, I think it was 2018, we had a beautiful bloom of hydrangeas. If you had your hydrangeas, everyone bloomed. They were loaded with blooms. In fact, some of the pictures that I showed initially were taken at that year. That was because we had a nice, even, cool warming through the summer, and we had a lot of rain. Hydra is water, so they do like water. Okay. Yes?
What's the latest part of the year that you can prune without damage?
You want to get your pruning done by this time of year. You know, I wait until the buds are beginning to swell. Then I can tell which canes are live, which canes aren't. There's no buds on the cane, and the fact is, just an aside, I'm glad you asked that. Right now, when you are pruning in this, sometimes you don't know whether there's a live cane or a dead cane. But if you have done your pruning and you have these sticks with nothing on them, at this point, just early in May, chances are those sticks are not going, they are dead. But, you know, sometimes you don't know for sure, you know, when you're looking at them. So I tend to leave, if I'm in doubt, you know, I'll maybe cut, well, it won't have any buds for one thing, but sometimes you don't know for sure about that. And you've done your pruning and you know, they're really beginning to fill in with leaves down near the ground. And you have this stick that doesn't seem to have anything, doing anything. Well, it's not. And you can go ahead and clip those down into near the ground. Okay, so it's another thing. There is what is called a Nico blue, and it's an old-fashioned hydrangea. It is the bluest, beautiful, beautiful. Well, you know, back years ago when I wasn't a master gardener and thought I knew something about gardening, but realized I didn't know that much after all. But anyway, I purposely purchased a new, you know, a Nico blue, Nikki, I believe is the way it's spelled. Well, one year it had blooms. The next year it had no blooms. And maybe then I'd get one bloom. And then after a while, I was getting no blooms. It happens to be very sensitive to the cold. And you really, here, now things are changing, but in the past, here in Northeast Ohio, it was just too cold sensitive. And the plant looked great, had all these beautiful leaves and nothing. And here's a picture. Here, you'll have to come and get down here. It's such a beautiful blue. You could pass that around. I'm tethered here. And, you know, everybody wants to have that beautiful, beautiful blue. But it's, if you happen to have the perfect soil, perfect place, and we have a nice mild winter, it might bloom. On the other hand, chances are it's not going to here. It thrives a little further south of here, you know, because it's just one of those that the genetics of it just is not quite as cold hardy. That's what we call it. Okay. Now let's talk about pruning the paniculatas or panicle hydrangeas. Again, you can see the picture on the left is that's before I started the pruning. Then on the right, I have pruned back. This one you can prune hard because it's going to bloom on old or new wood. So you can really prune this well. And fact is, what if I have a tree hydrangea, and what they say is prune it to about the size of a beach ball. Just leave the, you know, prune out the spindly canes, crossing canes that would rub against one another, something like that. Remove the weak stems, and you can just, you know, prune it back very hard. Okay? That controls the height. If you don't prune it and you just let it go, that's when you get your 15-foot plant. So that's the reason these are so popular, because they're so easy. You don't have to worry. They aren't nearly as cold hard or as sensitive to coldness, because they don't form any buds until they form the new growth. So the buds don't get frozen like they could with the paniculatus or the macrophyllias, big leaves. Okay. And again, that's just another one. This is a tree hydrangea. You see it has, you can look at the stem. There's only one stem. Whereas if it were a macrophylla, you'd have lots of little sticks sticking up. Okay? The oak leaf does bloom on old wood. Now, if it's getting too big, like this one is, I'm going to have to, it's going to kill me to do it, but I'm going to have to cut these up closer to where the buds are. I'm cutting back, because the stem that's too, and of course then I'll miss the color forming and such. Another characteristic that you can see here of the canes, they're exfoliating. Looks like the skin peeling off. Like there's certain maple trees that do that and everything. There's just so much winter interest with the color in the fall, and then the canes look different. Now, if you're not into that kind of thing, it still looks like it dead sticks, but anyway. So the primary thing is you prune this to control size. Now, I don't know how big this probably wouldn't get too much bigger than this, but it really is a little beginning to kind of overcome some things that are next to it. But you don't want to do the pruning shortly after, when most of the buds are out or the flowers are out. Enjoy those for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then, prune them back. Then that's going to be, if you wait till the fall to prune, after, pinch off all of the buds or cut off all the buds, well, then you've cut off for the next year. So And maybe sometimes that's what you do. Sometimes if you're rejuvenating a plant, you do cut it back hard and then new growth, but you will sacrifice buds, blooms the next year. Okay, now, so why is my hydrangea not blooming? It could be due to the way, when you pruned, what you pruned, things like that. It may be in too much shade because it wants some particularly it wants some sun, particularly the nice morning sun when it starts strong and everything. But it's not going to do well if it's under a great big shade tree that really doesn't, you don't get much sunlight there. Maybe it's too dry of an area. You might have to dry, sometimes you have to water hydrangeas, particularly they tend to really wilt down in the afternoon and if they're out in the hot sun. Also, it could be that you've got too much nitrogen. You put nitrogen on your lawn, and let's say you have a hydrangea here, and you're feeding your lawn with high nitrogen. Some of that, depending upon how you're putting down your fertilizers, could, bounce over in. So if you've got too much nitrogen, or maybe you intentionally put some nitrogen on it, not knowing that that's probably not what you want to do. And then, of course, like I said, it's very sensitive to the climate if it's one of the microphyllias. Our climate seems to be warming, but this spring has been weird because we've had 70-degree days in February and 30-degree day, so we're still not out of the woods yet. We're getting close. Okay. All right, this just gives you some of my references. If you want, you can take a picture of that, or you can Google it on your computer. Here's one is a copy of the card that I handed out. Over here is an app that you can use on your phone, or it's iNaturalist. Now, the one that I really like is Seek. This is a relatively new, it's an improved, it's made by iNaturalist. The thing about this, it does use AI technology, and it is so quick. You take a picture, you open the app, take a picture, and within seconds, sometimes you get what it is if you're trying to identify. So that's really cool. Because the other day I was looking at this plant and I knew I'd planted something there last year and I just couldn't remember what it was. Took a picture of it and sure enough, oh yeah, now I remember that. Okay, I appreciate your attention. I hope we can better understand your hydrangeas. If you have any questions, we could take a few questions. Yes.
That you mentioned, does that give you detailed variety, or does it just give you a generic?
The question is, does the app Seek or anyone? Generally speaking, it's probably going to be the kind of plant it is. It depends. Then you can maybe, there's all kinds of information that you can start digging into it. But I use it primarily just, oh yeah, what is this? Or if I'm out in the woods and I see a wildflower, I'll take a picture of that or something. But it will tell you the type of plant. Like in my case, it was a sumac, and then I could look up, okay, it said, so, fragrant sumac or something like that. So I looked that up, and then, oh yeah, okay. So, yes.
Okay, so say you have all of these hydrangeas and they haven't bloomed for 2 years or more. Can you, what do you suggest? I mean, we get loads of green leaves. They get high, beautiful, but no blooms. Can you put them all down and then just start chopping them in half and putting them elsewhere and hope that they grow? Or
Yeah,
what do you suggest?
hydrangeas are easy to propagate that way. You know, if the hydrangea bush itself gets too big, you can actually dig it up. They're relatively shallow roots and divide it. And like you said, maybe you've had it in too much shade, or maybe you know it gets so much hot sun later in the day, and you have a place where it can get that hot or that sun in the morning. It would be worth trying that. And you know, now that I've told you about different, you know, look at the formation of stems in the spring before all that growth begun, then that can tell you about, oh, that must be the macrophyllias, which are the ones that are so sensitive to temperature, sensitive to water, you know, they're a little, they're, you know, they're so beautiful, but they are, take a little more care. Where a paniculata will usually, you see those in the shade, you see them in the sun. They're much more tolerant of the sun. Never blue. The panacea for all developers is to get a blue paniculata or a blue smooth leaf. You know, just that's the way the genes are. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Hope you've learned something. And good luck.